account, that's actually the super one, right? Super administrator we can call. It has more permissions and features than the administrator accounts that we create. So usually that is not used. So usually we create separate administrator accounts for management, right? Administrator account is only used when required. Like in Linux, so the super administrator account is actually the root account, and that account is not actually used when you are using the operating system, right? You are just creating a separate account and using the sudo functionality, right, to run commands as admin, but you are not directly using the root user. So that is usually for security, because even in Windows, it's they don't recommend using the administrator to do everything, right? They don't recommend have I mean keeping logged on for a long time in the administrator account, right? Because when you are running or when you are using the administrator account, there are many risks. Like if there's a virus attack, you plug in a pen drive or something, or in the network you download and you run something which maybe has a virus, right? So yeah, so since it's the super administrator, it can affect the whole operating system. While if you are just using a normal user account, uh, there is less risk for the operating system, due to a virus attack or whatever, right? So if you are using just a normal user account, you just plug in a pen drive, even if it has a virus, it can't affect actually the entire operating system, or system files and so on, because it doesn't have permission, right? So if you want to plug in some pen drive which you are not sure if there are viruses, don't plug it in the administrator account. Just have a normal user account and plug it in that account, right? So even if there are viruses in it, so it will just infect your user account only, right? Because the normal user account, it doesn't have permission to write to the Windows folder program files, right? It cannot write. So even if there is a virus in your account, right, so it can affect your profile user account profile folder only, right? So usually the critical places, the user account does not have write access, so the virus attack will only be limited to your user account mainly, right? So if something happens to your user account and it is not usable, then you can just delete your user account or your user profile folder and then create a new one, right? So it does not affect your entire operating system, right? So that is the safest way. So it's better if you can use the normal user account when you are using every day, and then just use the administrator when you need to install or do things like that. That is the recommended way. Microsoft says that you should use Windows, right? But I know most people use the administrator account because it's easy. Yeah, so yeah, it is easy, but then you have to be careful, right? Any pen drives you plug in, or any software you are downloading, or maybe you're going to some sites, maybe to download software or other things, right? So viruses can download and infect your computer. Yeah, and also email, right? So if you get any unknown email and you are not sure, don't click the links which are in the emails, because they might contain virus or ransomware or things like that, right? So if you are using an administrator account and you maybe go to one of these sites or click one of those email links, it might infect your whole computer, right? So if you are using just a normal user account, even if you click one of those things, it cannot usually affect your whole computer, right, or your operating system. So that is the best way to use your Windows operating system, right, if possible. You should limit use of your administrator account. Then if any virus or whatever comes, it will not affect your operating system. Otherwise, if it infects your operating system, and it might delete some files, it might change registry settings. So sometimes even if you remove the virus, those settings, they will not be changed, right? Any registry settings that the virus changes, you have to manually find out and restore them, right? Because yeah, so you may know this, even if your pen drive is infected with a virus, let's say it hides all the files, right? So even if you clean your pen drive with a antivirus software, right, it does not show the hidden files, right? So you have to go and manually do that. So like that. So if your computer is infected and if you are using the administrator account, so according to the virus, it might change some registry settings or put some files in your Windows folder. Yeah, it can hide the virus in your Windows folder or whatever, right? Depending on the virus type. So sometimes you may not know that, or it might install some kind of uh, process in your computer which starts up automatically when login, right? So you might not know about that, but when you are having administrator account, since you have full permission, when you click a link or when you install software, those things can happen. So when you install software, make sure you download from the real authentic website, right? So there may be some other sites which you download software, but just check whether those are real sites. So you can find user feedback usually about those sites which you download softwares, right? Yeah, so so basically like if you're installing something in Windows, you have to basically download from the Microsoft site, and then other Office should be Office and like that, right? So for each software there is an official website, so you have to use those to make sure that you don't get viruses installed in your computer, right? Because in other places it might be the same setup file, but there can some, we don't know, right? Viruses can be included in those setup files, so we don't know, and when we install the virus also to your computer, right? So yeah, so I told you about contact. So this is not a user account. This is just some information about uh, a person, right, which is related to the company. Then we can have printers, shared folders. So these are all leaf objects, right? You cannot, these are not containers where you can have other objects inside, right? So I showed you how to search in the domain, right? There's a search function, just type the username, and there's also advanced search function also where I can use any of the attributes like first name, last name, or mobile number, address. So those things I can use for the search also. Right. Then replication, there were some. So intrasite means the same site replication, right? So replication means copying. So if you have two or more domain controllers, they should replicate all the time, right? So a change done in one server should be copied to the other server, right? So then changes done in the other server should be copied to this server like that. So the copy of the Active Directory or those domain controllers should be same, the Active Directory especially, right? And yeah, the whatever the dependencies of the Active Directory, like DNS, yeah, so things like that. Those should be in sync with all the servers, right? Otherwise, if they are not synchronized, then there might be problems. For example, let's say I created a user account in one server, right? And then if someone tries to log in using another server, so if that user account is not copied to the other server, then that person cannot log in. Basic example. Intersite means different location. So then the replication might be slow according to the link speed, right? Then there's this knowledge consistency checker, which runs on all domain controllers. It will check the replication if it is properly going on, right? And yeah, it will keep the uh, path properly. That is from which domain controller to which domain controller it should copy. So yeah, basically it's like this. Let's say you have 3 domain controllers which are connected to the network. So replication should happen between these 3 servers, right? So if you okay, I will just so servers 1, 2, 3. So any change done in server 1 should be replicated to 2 and 3, right? Anything done in 2 should be replicated to 1 and 3 likewise. So there is a direction of how this replication should happen, right? So whatever changes done in 1 should be going to 1 and 3. So whatever changes done in 2 should go to 1 and 3. Then whatever changes done in 3 should go to 1 and 2. Right. Now let's say if they have more than 3, right? 5, 6, like that. So then also replication will happen, and how this replication happens is done by that knowledge consistency checker, that process, right? It's running in all the servers. So it will find out how many like domain controllers are there, and it will properly put the synchronization path like this all the servers, so that they replicate properly. So this is I in this example only 3 servers. So usually from one server, there will be outgoing two paths, right? If you take one server. Yeah, because there are two other servers available. So yeah, so the number of paths here is because there are only three, is limited. But let's say we have 4, 5, 6, a lot of domain controllers, right? Then there will be a lot of paths which we need to synchronize. So actually, you don't have to, if you have, let's say you have 5 servers, since there are 3 servers here, an update from one server should go to the 2 other servers, right? So if you have 5 servers, so a change in one server should go to the other 4 servers. Right. So usually there is a limit in the, these paths. I think like about maximum 3 paths are used per server, right? So even if the number of servers increase, so the paths, number of paths in the server will not, the synchronization paths will usually be limited to 3. So that is done by the knowledge consistency checker. Yeah, so see, defines domain control path that AG changes flow through and ensures no more than 3 hops exist between any 2 DCs. So it makes sure that the maximum only 3 hops exist between any 2 DCs. So that is the paths which are used for synchronization. Yeah, there's a limitation. So this will select the best path possible. Right. So you have a separate partition for storing these kinds of details or directory partitions. So there are 5 directory partition types in the AD database. One is the domain directory partition, then schema, global catalog, application, configuration. So each of these contain the relevant things, right? Like domain directory contains all objects, including users, groups, computers, or use. Then schema contains the information here to define AD objects, right? Schema. So schema classes are what? User account object, computer account object, those objects, right? And the attributes. That means if you take a user account, you have first name, last name, etc. Then if you take a computer account, it has computer name, description, example, right? So all those belong to the schema. Then you have the global catalog, which contains copy of all objects in the forest. So application directory contains all the application details. Then configuration stores the configuration of the entire forest. Yeah, we talked about these operation master roles. So the very first domain controller we add to the domain will have all the master roles. There are 5. So if you want, you can transfer the master role to another computer. So these are the 5. So let me boot up my server. Yes, so you should have your display names as your name and your index number, right? So I think you have been told about that, right? How you should have your display name and the attendance, how you have to. The second one will be listed here automatically, right? Then all I have to do is just click this change button and then transfer the current role to the other one, right? Then from the other server, if I log in and if I view this menu, it will be the opposite, right? The operations master will be that server. Then I can transfer it to this server, right? So that is basically, so from any server you can open this and you can transfer from the current master to another server, right? So these are three of those operation master values. Yeah, see, so here, if I right click the top one, I can either change the domain or domain controller. This is to manage, multiple domains or domain controllers in the forest. So using this same server, I can, manage other domain properties or domain controllers also. So here I can change the domain, right? So if I have 2 or 3 domains in this forest, I can manage the other domains from this server. And then here I can change the domain controller to another one which is there in the same domain. And then when I click OK, it will actually show me the properties of that other domain, right? I can manage it from here. Or other domain controller, right? So if it is the same domain, then this domain properties will be the same, right? But there might be some differences. But if it is the same domain, then all the these functions will be the same. If it is a different domain, then it will be different. Now here I can raise the domain functional level. So this is maximum. I cannot, right? Highest possible. So I cannot raise anymore. Right. So I cannot raise the forest functional level from here. I have to use another tool. So forest functional level I kept at 2008. So I can upgrade that. Right. So I open Active Directory Domains and Trust tool. So here if I right click the top one, here I can change the forest. I can manage another forest, right? Or yeah, I can change the domain controller to manage, right? And then I can, right. So this is the, so I showed you 3 operation masters. So this is the 4th one, domain naming operation master, right? So this one. So this is what I showed now. So I have to use the Active Directory Domain and Trust tool to change the master role of this, right? If you take the Active Directory Users and Computers tool, so they are actually these 3 were there, right? You can change the infrastructure master, RID master, and the PDC emulator master, operation master. So those 3 can be changed from the Active Directory Users and Computers. So the domain naming master should be changed from the domain and trusts tool, this one. Active Directory Domains and Trusts. Right, so you just open the tool and right click the top one and go to Operation Master. Right here you can change the domain naming master. Now you have to have administrative and certain permissions should be there, like domain. You have to be the domain admin. So without those permissions, even if you are administrator, you cannot change those things, right? I see this domain admins, enterprise admins. I think enterprise admins. It has to be enterprise admins. And then schema admins to change the schema related, to change the operation master and so on. You have to have this additional permission. Now, if I create a new administrator account, I won't get these permissions, right? So this is given to the actual the super administrator. So in the previous versions, Windows 2008 and below, I think these permissions are not by default not given. You have to separately add them. So in 2012, it seems they are by default there. Because changing the operation masters, then schema, those are very big and critical things, right? So if you do any mistake, then you have a problem. Here you can raise the forest functional level also. See, now I kept it at 2008, so right, I can raise the forest functional level to 2008 R2, 2012 and 2012 R2. Those are the three possible. Yeah. So here it gives a warning after you raise the forest function level, it is possible that you may not be able to reverse it. Yeah, usually when you upgrade, you cannot go back, right? So you have to be very careful when you're upgrading. You have to make sure that whatever the servers or whatever, or maybe install applications, they support that level, right? If you have some softwares which works in 2008, but maybe it does not work in 2012, right? So that can happen. Let's say if you have a older version of a software and we have not upgraded it, right? So yeah, so let's say we purchase the license for some big software. So usually to upgrade it, then we have to pay for the license as well. So if we don't actually need an upgrade, so we will not be going for an upgrade, right? Because we have to pay for the license. If it is some kind of free software, then you can upgrade to the newest version. But if you are paying for a software license, then they don't give you free upgrades, right? You have to pay for the new version. So unless you want that new version, so you won't be buying it, right? So then there might be some software which are not compatible with the newer operating systems. So in that case, we will have to keep the functional level like this, because if you upgrade this functional level, then yeah, 2008, yeah, so we can upgrade maybe up to 2008 R2, then that should not be a big issue for applications. But if we upgrade this to 2012, then any applications or whatever we have installed should support 2012, or otherwise we might have problems, right? Because after upgrading 2012, we cannot actually have 2008 servers in the forest, right? So actually I think this will check also if there are any 2008 domains in the forest, and it will give a warning, right? So first you have to actually remove them from the forest domain to raise this functional level. Right, so those are 4, and there is one more, schema. So how you get the schema is, so you open a MMC and then you go to add remove snap-in and yeah, active directory schema. Right. So then you can, so you have to have permission, schema admin permission to open this, right? So you can see all the schema classes and attributes which are there in the active directory, right? You can see there are a lot of classes, right? So user is one we talked about. That's for the normal user account object, right? So these are the attributes of user. Count expires, bad password time, desktop profile, display name, given name, last logon. So for each user account, these attributes are there, right? So you can have some values for the users these attributes. Logon count, that means how many times the user has logged in. So you can see there are a lot of attributes for a user. Network address, then password history, profile path. Yeah, so that's all. So yeah, these are some permissions. Yeah, so so these are the classes for the objects which are available. Then we have the attributes. So these are the schema attributes which is there for those objects, right? Schema objects or classes. Yeah, the street address, those belong to the user account, right? And so yeah, so these are all the attributes which are used for user account, computer, printers, shared folders, whatever. So these are actually all the attributes which are there. You can change this if you want, right? Any values, or you can add the attributes here. Yeah, so on the top we have account expires. So that's the expire date of an account. Okay, so this is the schema. So these are very critical. If you change these values, then it will affect the entire all the things in the active directory and so on. So that is why special permission should be given even if you are administrator. Schema permission, admin permission should be available to change this, right? Because any change here will affect the entire active directory. So if you mistakenly do something, you might not be able to recover it unless you have backup or something, right? Right, so this is the schema. So there's no direct tool for that. You have to open the MMC tool. So which is there in your, usually that MMC tool is also there in your Windows computers also, right? Uh, so you, that is used to, we can have custom based tool monitoring or whatever tools, right? Just add uh, the relevant snap-in and then we can use. So these are actually created from that MMC also, right? These tools are created using the MMC tool. We just add a snap-in and yeah, so let me show you again. So when you open MMC, you get a blank thing. So you can add, yeah, so you see device manager, disk management. So those things are there, right? So if I add device manager, yeah, I can add either for this computer or yeah, I can uh, create a device manager for another computer, maybe another network computer, maybe in the lab or server, whatever, right? Yeah, so I insert a local computer, right? So I can open the device manager in this computer. So I can create one in a remote computer also, right? I can manage from here. I can have multiple things here also, right? A customized one maybe. I might have disk manager also. You can have either disk computer or another remote computer, right? Yeah, so maybe I can have both these, right? So this is the disk manager. And then, yeah, I can save this, giving a name, right? Then when I open it, I will have this customized one, which has the device manager and the disk management both. So this can be either in my computer or server, or another remote um, computer or server, right? So I can use this tool to have customized things like this. So MMC stands for this Microsoft Management Console, right? Right. So those are the operation master roles. Okay, I didn't show you the how to change the schema master, right? So by default, this activity schema is not here. I have to actually register DLL, right? So I already did that. So that is why I am getting this schema entry here. Otherwise, by default, you don't get this schema here, right? To add. Yeah, so I right click this and operation master. Yeah, so this is the place to change the schema master role. Yeah, so I can directly connect to schema operation master from here, and then change operation masters, reload the schema. If I do some changes, then I can reload the schema, right? Then permissions. Yeah, so schema admins have write permission, and yeah, so these some other, yeah, system has full permission. Authenticated users means normal users. They can only read the schema. They cannot write. So yeah, even administrators also don't have permission, limited permission, right? Only schema admins are given write permission here, if you can see here, right? Administrators also don't have, normal administrators don't have write access. Okay, so that is how you change the schema master. Yeah, so when you are removing a domain controller from a forest, make sure not to remove the domain controllers which have these operation master roles, right? Otherwise, you are in trouble. If you actually remove one of the servers which has the master roles, or let's say that that server or servers which has the master role, suddenly it's not working, and you cannot recover also, right? Um, yeah, then you're in trouble. So then you will not be able to do certain things which are related to that master role, right? For example, to change the schema, definitely the master should be there. Schema master, that server with that role should be online, right? So otherwise you cannot change anything. So then if for some reason you accidentally remove that from the domain of forest, right, or that server is not working anymore, then so you have to go to the recovery steps, right? So you have to use some tools to manually force remove the master role from that non-working server and then uh, assign it to a new server. Right. So this okay. So any questions from what I talked about these master roles? Okay. Trust relationships are there between servers, domain servers. Oh, yeah. Right. So yeah. So trust relationships are automatically established between all domains in the forest. So okay. So yeah. Let me give an example. Yeah, let's if I take the same thing. So let's say there are three domains servers in the same forest, right? So so if this is in the same domain, right? Usually automatically trust will be there, right? Like yeah. So trust relationships are established automatically between all domains in the forest. Between all domains in the forest. Right. Now, even if this, if we take this as a single domain, right? So domain controllers in a domain. So domain controllers, the trust will be automatically built, right? When you add to the domain, those will be auto. So only when that trust relationship is there, you can communicate or synchronize or replicate like this. right? So without having that trust relationship, you cannot replicate, right? So I told you that there is a lot of security in this Active Directory, right? So when you add a domain controller to a domain, so certain features are used to make sure to authenticate that that is the real domain controller in the domain, right? Not someone else trying to maybe hack or whatever. So based on those, so maybe you might have a unique ID or maybe a password or key or so those kind of methods are used to validate as a proper domain controller in the network, right? So if someone uh, so if someone else outside tries to show that okay, I'm also a real domain controller, so this is not actually a real one, right? Someone is trying to hack into the system, right? um, so that can be identified because when you're having maybe your unique ID or uh, so various security methods are there. So maybe connection is uh, using encryption, then you should use a key, right, which should be known by all the domain controllers, right? So if someone outside tries to connect to this domain, right, so build a trust relationship, so that won't happen, right? So because then so there are ways to identify whether the server or the device which is trying to communicate, whether it's a real one, right? So otherwise it will not communicate anything, right? So this transfer of this or replication, if you send this to someone outside, then you have an issue, right? Because you are sending critical maybe username and passwords or critical information you will be sending. So you have to make sure that you send it to the correct authentic servers, right? Yeah, so trust relationships will be automatically be established among all domains in the forest. So not only the domain controllers in the same domain, but between two domains also, those trust relationship will be there if you take one forest, right? Right. So this trust, yeah, it does not mean permissions. So permissions are, yeah, trust is not permission. It's a different thing, right? So permissions, you should also give permissions also to access other resources, but trust is like the foundation, right? Or where the communication starts, right? So before giving permission, this trust relationship should be there as a foundation. So only if this trust relationship is there, you can give permission. Otherwise, you cannot give permission also without the trust, right? Yeah. See, so there, when if there is no trust between domains, then you cannot give access between domains. So first thing is you should have the trust relationship either between domains or in the same domain. So then only you can give permissions to access the other resources, right? The other server or whatever. So if this trust relationship is not there, then definitely you cannot give permissions and you cannot access. So yeah, it says here trust relationship defines whether and how security principals from one domain can access network resources in another domain. So according to this trust relationship, it defines how the security should work from one domain to another domain. Right. So we take the role of the forest. So all domain in the forest share the some common characteristics. So yeah, it should be how it is, right? So if you take a forest, you have 2 or 3 domains. So there are some common things which are shared by all the domains, right? Schema is the same, right? If you take a forest, so the schema will be the same in all the domains, right? Then forest-wide administrative accounts definitely will be the same. Then operation masters, yes. Then global catalog, trust between domains, replication between domains. So these features are common in the domains of the same forest. So separate domains within the same forest. So they have those, all of these have those characteristics commonly, right? So this is the forest with 3 domains, right? So schema is the same. You cannot have a different schema to these domains. So the schema will be the same. That means whatever the objects, schema classes, and whatever the attributes, you cannot have different schemas in these domains, right? Because they belong to the same forest. The schema will be the same, and so as the other those characteristics. Now if you take another forest, then the schema can be different between these two, right? So if you want a domain with a different schema, then you can't have the domain in the same forest, right? Then you will have to, if you want a different schema for the new domain you are going to create, then you should have a separate forest, right? Otherwise you cannot have a different schema for a domain. Right. So yeah, now the schema can change. So the same will apply to all the domains in the forest. Same schema, right? Right. So and so is other things. Operation masters will be the same. Global catalog, trust between domains, and how replication happens. So you can't change these things. These will be the same in all domains in the forest. Yeah. So I talked about this global catalog server. So the very first domain controller installed in a forest will have this global catalog feature, right? Yeah. So the very first has this global catalog feature. So any additional domain controllers that you install, so you can have this global catalog feature configured. Okay, so what does this global catalog use for? So these critical functions. So it facilitates domain and forest-wide searches. So when you want to search in the domain, right? So you can search in the whole domain or in the whole forest if this server is a global catalog server. Then it allows you to log on across domains. So if you have multiple domains, so you can use the same login to login in separate domains, right? Using their user principal name or the username. So this global catalog also can keep universal group membership information. That is why it's called global catalog, right? So yeah, so let's say now I have two domain controllers. Yeah, so this is the primary domain controller. Right. So DC1 is the primary domain controller, DC2 is the secondary domain controller or backup domain controller. These are connected to a network, right? Okay. So right now what yeah, so there are username accounts created on this domain, right? So these two are linked. So a copy will be going to the other one, right? Whatever the user accounts will be there in the other domain controller as well. Now, let's say for some reason this fails, right? Okay, now tell me, can the users log into the client computers using the other domain controller? Now, can the users log into the domain using the other domain controller?
No, because there are separate domain controls.
No, so these are both in the same domain and the same forest. Yeah, I will draw the forest also. So let's say this domain is abc.com. This belongs to abc.com. So these two domain controllers belong to the same domain. And replication is also happening. Just versions are different, but same domain and same forest. Let's say the forest has the same name also. Right now, so primary domain control has failed, but we have a secondary one. So now can the users log in using the secondary one?
Yes, because they are in the same domain controller.
Okay. What about the others? So you should be able to answer from uh, what I have taught so far. Okay, then I will ask one by one. Nimesh, what do you think? Can the users log into the other domain controller?
Uh,
Yes or no?
can
Sorry?
can
Can. Okay. Right. Then Ahmad, Ahmad, what do you say to this? Yes or no? Can the users log into the second domain controller?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Then Chamari?
No, sir.
No. Okay. Right. You are saying okay. Let's ask the others also. Dinesh
Can, sir.
can. Okay. Hamsat
Can, sir.
can. Okay. Hasita?
No, sir.
No. Right. Himansa? Himansa, what do you think?
Mm,
Sorry, I didn't hear.
mm,
Yes or no?
yes.
Yes. Okay. Vinushan? What do you think? Can or can't? Yes or no? Vinushan, can you hear me? Vinushan, can you hear me? Right. So if you are in the lectures, so make sure that you are actually there, right? So if your mic is not working, the chat or something. So otherwise, then I will have to think that you are just logged in and not there. Okay, Lakshita?
Can, sir.
Can. Okay. Marshani? Yes or no? Can the other users log in?
Hello, sir. Can you hear me?
Yes. Uh, so can the other users log in using this other domain controller?
I think can.
Can. Okay. Then Nimesh?
can
Can. Okay. Tarinder? No. Okay. Then Vikash
Can, sir.
can. Okay. Vikash, you said no, right? Can you tell me why you said no?
Can,
You said can.
yes.
Okay. So yeah, there were a lot of
Hello?
yes.
Hello?
Okay, Vinushan, yes. Were you not there when I talked because there was no answer? So
Excuse me, sir?
yes, I can hear you.
Okay.
So can you tell me the answer to this? So there was no answer from you, so I thought that you were not there. Hello, I cannot hear you.
Sir, can you hear me?
Right, I can hear you now. Right, so yeah, when I asked you about the question, there was no answer, so I thought you were not there, right? So make sure that you are there when I ask the question, right? So if your mic is not working, then you can just put in the chat. Right, now I asked if here, what I have drawn here, the first domain control, if it is not working, then the second one. Now, can the user log into the domain using the second one? Yes, Vinushan, I'm asking from you. Right, okay. Then can you send the answer in the chat if you have a problem with your mic? So yes or no, can the other users log in from the second domain controller? Or no? What is your answer? Okay, you are saying yes. Okay, so a few said no. So can one of you tell me why you said no? Yes, so some of you said no. I think Himanta, what was your answer? Is it a yes or a no?
Yes, sir.
You said yes. Okay, who are the people who said no? So can one of the people who said no give me a reason why you said no?
There are different versions.
Different versions. Okay, no. That is not a correct reason. Okay, so here the... Okay, so I will tell the answer. So actually, you cannot log in from this second domain controller, backup domain controller, right? The reason is not because there are two versions. That is not the reason, right? So two versions can be there in the, that is possible, right? So that is acceptable. There is no issue with having two versions. So then what is the problem? Why is this not possible?
There are two domain controllers.
No, not that. So it's the same domain, and although the versions are different, they both are in the same domain, and the replication and everything is happening, right? So the issue why the second domain controller won't work right? And why the users cannot log in, is this. Let me draw it in another color. Right. So the second one is not a global catalog server, right? So if it is not a global catalog server, it cannot. I told you in the beginning, if it doesn't have the global catalog feature turned on, right, or if it is not a functioning as a global catalog server, the server cannot function on its own, right? So having a setup like this is useless, right? Because now see now if the okay now if this secondary DC2 is down, right, then definitely DC1 will work, no issue, right? So it's the primary domain controller and it's the global catalog, right? Now if the primary domain controller goes down, the DC2 will not function as a backup server due to it not having the global catalog functionality, right? So I told you in the beginning, so if the domain server has the global catalog, then it can function as a standalone. That means it can function on its own, right? So if it does not have the global catalog functionality, so for example, this DC2, for this server to function, it needs another server which has the global catalog functionality, right? It cannot function on its own. That means if the other server is down and only this server is functioning, like for example here DC2, it cannot authenticate the users, right, without having the domain global catalog functionality. So if you are having a backup domain controller and so you want it to work immediately when the other server goes down, then you should have the second one also as a global catalog, right? Now if this was a global catalog, then this will work. So the version difference, it doesn't matter, right? Even if it's the same version or different versions, that doesn't matter, right? Because it's not the version, because these two domain controllers are in the same domain. So if one of these fails, then the other should work, but it should be a global catalog server, right? So in this example, only two domain controllers are there. So one with a global catalog and the other didn't have this global catalog, right? So now in this case, it won't work. So users will not be able to log into the domain, right? So yeah, so even if you have a backup domain controller, then that function will not be there. The user counts and all will be there in the second domain controller, but without a global catalog, it cannot function as a standalone domain controller, right? Authenticate. Username and passwords copy is there, right? So you can recover those, but now users cannot log in, right? So the domain will be down. So if you want to have proper backup, right? So the second one should be also configured as a global catalog. Right. So I hope that is clear. So right. And yeah, so let me save this now. So let's say it was like this. DNS. So yeah, now both have the global catalog functionality. DNS only here, and yeah, the DNS is not there. Now, what about this example? If the first one fails, will the second one work? Will DC work? Domain controller. Global catalog is there in both. Now will it work? Yes, anyone?
Now works.
Okay. You so right. Okay. So what about the others? Do this work will work now? Now the global catalog is.
Mm, So I think it's what
Also saying it's work. What about the others? About the others, this will work? Yes or it won't work? No.
It's working, sir.
Working. Okay. Right. So people who are using this will not work. Anyone will not work?
yes.
You are saying this is working, right? Or who is this won't work? Anyone who is saying no to? So all are saying yes to this. Anyone saying no? So since I don't get any no's, I'm hoping that you are all yes, right? So actually this setup work, right? Although it has the catalog, it does not have the DNS server functionality, right? Without a DNS, the domain cannot function. I told you in the beginning when I showed you how actually in the server. So DNS functionality should be right. Without DNS server, domain can't work because it needs a DNS server, right? So I told the first time when I installed, right? So if we are having a backup server or backup server like this, recover, then definitely the DNS there should be a backup as well. So we usually put the DNS service. This no other external DNS server available, right? If external DNS server already, then we actually have to install it here in the domain controller, right? Use that DNS server purpose, right? Then DNS also then there should be a backup. Say there's a DNS. So there should so definitely be a DNS server if this is outside. So this is because this one fails. Fails the takeover. Here now DNS function is only in service is only in the primary server, but the secondary server it does not have. Without the DNS server controller function, right? So there should be DNS server to function. This DNS and global cache is mandatory. You have to have that for the proper functioning of the domain controller. So yeah, so actually this is called the domain controller, right? Right. So I questions to just see idea has now it seems gone. I showed that day. Right. So now you know. So the DNS and global cat be there in the server, right? The backup server as well are not function as a domain controller, right? Keep this. What will happen? Putting up a server and you are having a backup server. Then if you are not proper backup server, then in this, so this will be used. Right? So you begin something that here because it's replicated, but it cannot function as a domain controller. It will not log in and people can do their work due to that. So make sure having plan to properly implement it. It will be useful to the users, right? So for this to properly work, DNS should be installed as well. Okay. Yeah. Or if DNS definitely backup, right? Our DNS server, the server will not function. There should definitely be a DNS server. So if you are installing in the domain, then it will be in the backup control as well. So remember that these features needed for the functioning of main control. Okay, is it clear? Any questions?
No, sir.
Okay, so now you see the global log used for. So should be there for functioning of the server, right? To work as a standalone or that for that server to work on without any other servers, there should definitely be a global catalog and then DNS will be there. Okay. So to the forest root domain. So what is this root domain? So this is really the very first domain get in the first, right? So the very first domain that installed a new domain server, a new tenant for us, right? Created when I showed you in the server. Right? So I created a new forest, created a new domain. So that domain, the very first domain forest, is we call that root domain, right? So yeah, the first is the root and is referred to as a forest domain. So the very first domain created in the that we call the forest root domain. So yeah, so it disappears, or you accidentally remove that root domain. Everything goes. The tree structure is built on this root domain, right? So the root domain uses DNS server, global cat, forest administrative accounts, operation mask. So these things handled by the root domain. So I can right. So the DNS server, then global catalog, then forest-wide administrative account. These are accounts, admin accounts, which apply to whole forest operation masters. Yeah. So if we take this school.com as the forest root domain, right? Then child domains we have us.coolgadgets.com, then us. Yeah, it's the same thing, and there should something different. Uh, then we have tools.com, and then some child domains are there, asia.tools and america.52, right? So you can see the root or starting point is the top one, right? It's the very first that is. So if how this is the top one is not there, then that or the definitely be there, right? So yeah, if something happens, then your domain go, because all are children of this one root domain, right? Right. So so I explained this earlier also. So if it's the same domain, that same name will be used for the domain, right? Even if right. So an AD for only one tree is best. So that is for this one. This is you can see only one, right? So this is saying it's right. So in the forest you have one tree or one domain. You are having another domain, then you have to have a separate, right? So if you are having another domain, then this will be a separate tree. So you can have branches going like this. These are more branches. So there is a different tree. This is one tree. This is another tree. Two domains. It says it's better to have one tree. So can easily manage. Yeah, and you will have just one name, right? Just .com. So under that, yeah. So yeah, this one is not correct. Oh no, this is okay. So yeah, this is a root domain. Then you can have either child domains of this, or can have a separate domain, right? So the same forest, the same tree. Okay. When two companies or large companies which want to separate business needs. Yeah, this can happen. So two companies can become one, right? So yeah, they if I say, for example, yeah, like SLT Mobitel, now they have joined, right? So their logo says SLT Mobitel and combine their logos also. So yeah, that is one example, and we can split into separate units also. That means one company can divide into two or more. Yeah, so usually it will be two, right? I don't think a company to like three parts. So happens then. Then you have to manage this. Multiple tree structure makes sense. So usually you'd have, if possible, one tree like this, the root, forest root. So it's better to have one tree like this. Then if it splits, let's say your company splits into two, you can have multiple. You can have another tree. Other. So when you merge, actually, yeah, if you have separate trees, then you can put you can create. Then when you split, then you have to actually separate into two trusts. Then it will be two organizations. So you will have to manage them separately, right? Right. So small medium business, most of them they will select a single name. It's simple, then management is easier, right? Then access to is easier. So single domain means like this, one tree. So if you have several have a, when you manage, it will be complex, right? Because you have to separately manage those domains and things like that. And you have separate domains, so you have to pay for those domains also. Right. So small and so they keep it simple, right? Only one thing. Then it is simple. Then cost is lower, easy to manage. Then since it's one domain, you can easily access all the domain. If accessing something in another domain, then you have security things and yeah. So it difficult, right? Configuring the security and all. Right. So single structure is easy and less expensive than may not always be a better service. Yeah, sometimes having split domains might be the best solution, but maybe due to financial issues, you might be having only one domain, right? Because if you are having admins, you have to pay for that, then manage. You might have to manage that separate. So, and then what about the resources? How to access the domain resources? Then extra security will be so you have to configure. So having one domain is easy to manage if possible. Yeah, so you can have one domain if need to set up policies. Yeah, these are the things that we did in the server. Okay, so when we talked about container objects and leaf objects, right? So those are right container, right? OU folders, groups, which can contain other objects. Leaf objects, the end objects, like user accounts, printers, network resource, group policy objects, like that. So there's a recycle bin. You can enable it, but if you enable it, you cannot disable it. Right? So that is there for if you delete accidentally delete something, you can recover from the active directory. Right? It's recycle bin. So use the search function to search for objects in active directory, right? Active directory users and computers. The large organizations might require domains, trees, forests, so on, right? So the forest is the you can take the forest as the largest logical active directory, right? Then it will be divided into domains, and then domains divided domains and so on. So domain is the primary identifying and administrative unit of the active directory. Contains all the domains, but if you take a domain, the main identifier of a directory. Now you know active directory. Right, so we will break now and we will come back in 15 minutes. You have to know about these things if you are using this, right? Might be boring because this is theory, but without knowing, so you have to properly know about the technology and whatever before you are using it, right? Otherwise, so now most of you didn't know those questions I asked, right? About having a backup domain controller and if it really functions as a backup. So if you just let's say you are given to install a domain controller, right? So new domain controller, and so okay, so you know that backup should be there, so you have the backup installed as well. But if you don't properly know about the technology, so as I showed you, if you don't properly configure the backup with the needed features, it will actually not work as a backup, right? Now, if when you are doing these things practically, so you should the best thing to do is just rather than waiting for things to fail, you can test it, right? By maybe putting the main domain controller offline, right? You can test and see if okay, you can log into the computers if this happens. So rather than waiting for things to happen and then finding solutions, it's good if you can have the solutions ready whenever things happen, right? Because sometimes you might not have time to yeah, if you are finding the solution when the problem comes, then it might take time because you don't know the issues and all that, right? That may come, and so it may take time. So yeah, so practically it's better to know the answers for the possible problems that may come beforehand, so that you can easily put the solutions, right? Right. So
Excuse me, sir.
yes.
Sir, අපිට Windows Server 2012 එක online මොකක් හරි practice කරන්න ක්‍රමයක් නැද්ද? මොකද
එකම
දාපු ගමන් මේ RAM එක මදි නිසා මේ stuck වෙනවා.
ඒ කියන්නේ ඔයගලන්ට virtual දාන්න අමාරුයි නේ.
ඔව් server OS එක දාපු ගමන් කොහොමවත් මේ කියන්නේ තව අපේ අර Linux එකක් එහෙම තියෙන නිසා හිර වෙනවා වැඩ කරන්න බෑ අමාරුයි.
ඔව් මොකද Linux එකක් තියෙනවා කියලා කිව්වේ?
නෑ අපි අර තව මේ virtual OS එකක් install කරලා තියෙනවා මේ Linux OS එක.
ඔව්.
ඒක practice කරන්න install කරලා තියෙනවා.
ඔව් install කරාට run කරන්න එකයිනේ එකපාර.
ඔව් මේ ඒකත් පොඩ්ඩක් අමාරුයි run වෙන්න සමහර වෙලාවට.
Linux එකත් අමාරුයි, ඒකින්ද Windows එක ඊට වඩා අමාරු වෙනවා කියලා කියන්නේ.
ඔව් සර්.
online කරන්න නේද?
ක්‍රමයක් නම් තියෙනවා. හැබැයි මේ කාල සීමාවේ කරන්න ටිකක් අමාරුයි. ඒක මේ බැංකු වලට යන්න ටිකක් අමාරුයි. නැත්නම් AWS ලගේ මේ free service එක free එකක් තියෙනවා මේ Windows 2090 servers data center version එක.
free version එක. එතකොට කොච්චර කාලයකද තියෙන්නේ ඒක?
ඒක තියෙනවා සර් සාමාන්‍යයෙන් අවුරුද්දක ඒ කියන්නේ ටයිම් එකක් තියෙන්නේ අවුරුද්දකට මම හිතන්නේ පැය 3000 ගාණක් කර එහෙම දෙනවා.
මට මතකයි. ඔව් මොකද්ද AWS එක කිව්වනේ? ඔව් මම බලලා තියෙනවා. හරියට.
ඒක අර account එක හදාගන්න ගිහුවාම සෑහෙන කචල් යනවා. ඒ කියන්නේ මේ යාළුවගේ මේ නියෝජිතව contact කරගෙනම තමයි යාළුවා මේ account එක verify කරන්නේ. automatically process එකේම වැඩ කරන්නේ නැහැ දැන් මේ කාලේ.
මේ දවස්වල මේ covid season මේ covid issue එක හින්දා
credit card දෙමත් ඕනේ ඊට පස්සේ.
ඒ කියන්නේ මේ ඒකේ free service එක ගන්න credit card එකක් දෙන්න ඕනද?
ඔව් credit card එක දාන්න ඕනේ. ඒ කියන්නේ free try එකක් දුන්නට මේ ඒකේ කැපෙනවා. රුපියල් 100ක් 200ක් වගේ මාසෙට වගේ කැපෙනවා මේ. නැත්තම් අර අපි සාමාන්‍යයෙන් service එකක් ගන්නකොට data මේ server එකක් ගොඩනගනවා කියන්නේ සෑහෙන ගණනක් දෙන්න ඕනේ. එහෙම නැතුව අවුරුද්දක free try එකක් තියෙනවා ඒ තෝරා ගන්නවලද ජීවිතේට.
හරි. ඕගොල්ලන්ට මේ RAM එක අප්ග්‍රේඩ් කරගන්න වගේ විදියක් නැද්ද? මම හිතන්නේ ඒක try කරොත් එක්කෝ මම හිතන්නේ at least 8GB වත් තිබ්බොත් කරගන්න පුළුවන් වෙයි. 4GB තියෙනවා නම් ඉතින් අනිවාර්ය definitely අමාරු වෙයි. මොකද 64 bit OS එකත් අමාරුවෙන් දුවන්නේ 4GB RAM එකේ. at least 8GB වත් තියෙන්න ඕන. Okay, so what is the very first step that you do after you install the server? To install a domain controller. So what is the very first thing that you do? You go to the add role wizard, right? So there you add the role as domain server. So that is the very first thing that you will do after you install the server, right? So before that, so you have to have the IP address and things like that. First you have to configure those details, right? So you have to have a static IP. You cannot have automatic or dynamic IPs in the server, right? So you have to configure a static IP. So let's say yeah, so you have the server. So say we are, let's say, using the range 192.168.0.0 network and /24. Okay, so what will be the IP address you are going to give to the server? Yes, anyone? So we have to give static IP. Even if there is a DHCP server or router in the network, which is automatically giving the IPs, so we have to actually turn the automatic or DHCP mode off in the server, right? And then manually assign a static IP. So let's say this is for internal purpose, right? So we are using this private IP range. So what is the IP you are going to give to this server? Yes, anyone?
192.168.0.254.
Okay, 254. Right. Okay. Usually, yeah. It should be either from the starting range or the ending range that we'll be using, right? I told you that usually there is a convention. That's not a rule, not a must, but usually there are two ways, right? Let's say the router. So routers, switches, everything, right? You can either use, let's say for the router, that is the very first device that should be in your network, right? So either you can give the first IP to the router, or you can give the last IP to the router. This is so that management will be easy, right? You give from the beginning end or the ending part, right? Either the first IP or the last IP. You usually give to the router so that you can easily remember or log in, or you can separate some IPs for the devices. I think it's easy to use the last IP range, right? So if you use like 0.1 for the router, then for your devices, you might start using from 2 onwards, right? 2, 3, 4 like that. But then let's say you have to put some manageable switches or servers. Then what do you do? So now if you give for, let's say 20 computers are there, so let's say we are giving from 0 to 20, so it would be like 20 something, right? 168.0. Yeah, let's say up to 221. Yeah, so something like this. So we have computers, right? Then yeah, then we have to give the server in some other kind range, right? So if you use this last part, then I think it will be easy. So 254 mostly a router will definitely be there in your network, right? Otherwise you cannot access the internet. So usually we will keep the last IP for the router, and then some, so we can give some IP which is maybe 253 or 252 or 250, right? We can give any IP so let's leave some space for, let's say, the router, and if you are putting manageable switches or maybe Wi-Fi access points, let's keep the last 4 or 5 IPs for that, and then let's start from let's say 250. So we will keep like 4 IPs for the right. So yeah, so then first you have to give the static assign the static IP to the server. So these things you have to do first before you add it to the domain. Sorry, yeah, domain, add the domain, right? The reason is you can change this IP address later, but when you are adding to the domain, so and installing the DNS server and everything, that the IP address is actually used for that, right? To create routing rules and so on in the domain server. So if you later change after adding to the domain, those rules, they might not change or update, right? What I'm saying is, let's say you had an IP, yeah, let's say you have an IP when you install in the domain server, let's say 22. So you add this domain controller to the domain, right? And then later you decide, okay, I cannot have this range because it's the range the computers are, right? So it's sometimes you might mistakenly use this IP for a computer. Then you have a problem, right? What will happen if you use the same IP for a computer? Yes, anyone?
Cannot identify this computer or this domain server.
Yeah, so there will be a conflict, IP address conflict, and actually both the server and the computer is not usable at that moment, right? Because that IP address conflict error will go to the this server and that computer both, because both are having the same IP, and then both will be unusable, right? So that is they won't be connected to the network until we fix or change one of the IPs to another IP, right? So if by mistake someone uses this IP to another computer in the network, right? Then this will actually disconnect. So actually both will be disconnected from the network, because there cannot be two IPs in the same network. So due to that reason, that is why we if you use an IP from the end, right? So something like 250, then no one can mistakenly, because usually we start from the beginning, right? 1 2 3 4, like that we give to the computers. We don't start from backwards, right? Starting from the big number and like that. Usually we start from the beginning. So that is why we should give to the servers an IP from the ending point, right? Ending IPs. And so this you might have to install maybe Wi-Fi access point or manageable switches to the network. So those also you might, so you have to give an IP, static IP, right? Because you need to be able to log into those devices and manage. So router, usually we give the last IP, then it's easy to, when we want to log into the router, we can easily remember the last IP. So then maybe Wi-Fi access points, we might give like 0.251 to 3 like that, right? And then so we can keep that for those devices, and then for the server we can give like 250, right? And then if you are putting another server, then 249 like that we can put, or we can start from 240 onwards. So anyway is possible. So that is what we have to do first. So we have to give a static IP. So you should not change the IP after you install the domain server, right? Because then the DNS and everything, it will be automatically configured for the IP. So if you change the IP, those details might, let me show you the DNS server of the, yeah, so either you can access from here. Actually, this only shows a kind of a summary, right? Yeah, you have to, I think, go to manage. No. Okay, so here, right. So you have to open the, so this is the DNS Manager, where we manage the DNS service, right? Yeah, so can you see, yeah, so this is the IP of the server actually. So yeah, so you see there are rules which are there using the, yeah, so these are the actually, I think these are the root servers, root DNS servers, right? This is where the, when you type google.com or yahoo.com, it actually goes to these root servers, right? So one of these root servers has the IP address related to what we are typing, right? Google or the URL we are typing, right? So you see, so there are, rules and things like that here added based on our IP address, what we configured, right, in the beginning. So, so if we change later the IP address, sometimes these might not update. Now, can you see here? The IP is being used for these entries here, right? So, so if you're changing your IP address, these might not update. So you see there are a lot of things. So these are actually, yeah, I think these are referring to ports. So domain DN, so this is how the DNS server works, right? So if you changing the IP might affect this DNS server features. Yeah, so sometimes when you change certain things, it will not update here, so you might have to manually come here and delete some of the things. So when you add computers also to the domain, it will come here in the DNS server, it will show, right? So remember I told you that the DNS server is needed for the domain functionality. Yeah, so yeah, this host A is this server. So yeah, so global catalog servers will be listed here, right? So any change in the, see this IP address is everywhere. Can you see? So if I change the server IP, these entries might not update, right? So then the DNS server, there will be problems. It will not work properly because the IP address here is not the same as the one which I have now changed in the server, right? So even when you are adding computers to the domain, you will get those computers here with the IPs or whatever. So if you change the name of the computer, so IP address, then also the same issue, right? It might not update here. So, and let's say you delete, maybe remove a computer from a domain, but still that value is available here. This will not remove, right? Update. So especially you can, so there's this thing called the cache, right? So if you clear the cache, actually it will automatically update or get updates from the current system and then update. But sometimes some things might not properly update, right? Especially if you are changing the IP address, right? So the very first thing you have to do is properly assign an IP address, right? Then you should not change if it's actually absolutely needed, right? You should not change the IP of the server because that IP might be used by a lot of processors, right? Okay, so that's the DNS server. Now, if for some reason the DNS is not working, right, the service, the domain server will not work. So actually you can, so yeah, I don't know if you know this, but so this is where you check the running services in your computer. Also, this tool is there, right? Services. Just go to Computer Manager and yeah, I will show you. In Computer Manager also you can Computer Management Services tool is there. Here at the last part you have the services. So here is where where you control all the background services, right? Yeah. So here DNS server. So right. So this is the DNS server service which should be running for the domain server to work. If something goes wrong with this service and it's not running, right? So then your Active Directory will not work or domain server will not work. So if you get an error saying DNS service not functioning or error whatever, then you should come here and check this if the DNS server is running. So things can happen, right? Maybe so this DNS server is here. You can see it's application, right? exe file. So maybe something can go wrong and maybe it can get corrupted or so it will not be able to that application might not be able to start up. Maybe the file is corrupted or things can happen, right? So this should be running. So if it is not running, then so it will not work. So here is where you check the running status of the services. In your computer also you have this, right? And some viruses also they might install as a service, right? So they will run every time you turn on your computer if it comes here, right? So you won't see anything. These services are actually called background services. You don't see a graphical anything when you start your computer, right? Or log into your computer. So these are just background processes which run in the background. So you don't see anything, sometimes when you log in, you might see some windows of some software, right? These don't have any graphical things. These are running in the background, services. So sometimes viruses might install as a service, right? Especially if you are using the administrator account. So because the viruses, if the virus infect in an administrator account, they can actually create these services, right? So you don't even know that it will automatically create a service and it will automatically start. So you won't be able to know that has happened. So you can't uninstall these services, right? Not like a software. These are in the registry, right? These service entries are in the registry. You can't uninstall this. So there are viruses which actually put a service here so that it will automatically start up, right? So even if you check add remove programs, you won't be able to detect that kind of virus, right? So usually if it is a software or it installs like an application, you can find in the add remove programs. But if it installs in this as a service, you cannot actually detect it, right? Unless your virus guard finds out, right? Sometimes it might be scripts running as viruses. So the virus guard might not detect, right? So anyway, there are critical. Yeah, I remember there's a virus which stops the what was it? Netlogon. Yeah, there are some critical services here which if they stop, it will some functions won't work. Like this server function also, it's needed for sharing and domain functionality. If it stops for some reason, maybe due to virus, then actually it will give an error and you won't be able to log into the domain, right? So there are I can't remember, there is a critical service here which if stops, then you won't be able to actually do anything. Yeah, so anyway, so this is the service manager, right? So here you can actually, if you are admin, yeah, some things you cannot stop, like here it's disabled, but some services you can't stop, right? So I think critical ones, yeah, that has not started. This is some kind of critical service. I cannot, so I'm admin, but I cannot stop this, see? So there's a, I can't change this also. So this is a critical service. Usually any service I can, change the startup type and everything. I can put automatic. So automatic delayed start means when you are logging in, the service will start with a delay, right? Not immediately when you start up your computer. There will be some kind of delay, right? For the service to run. If you just put automatic, it will immediately run when you turn on a computer, right? So manual means you have to manually start and stop the service. And then if you put disable, it will not automatically start up. So you can see the, yeah, there are services which start automatic, right? When Windows starts up, then there are services which have the delay start. Trigger start is actually done by other services, right? These manual ones, So actually we can start manually like this or by another program, right? And then there will be some, yeah, some services are disabled. So things which we might not need. Right. So Active Directory also, you saw that there were some services which are running, right? Here, Active Directory domain services is currently running. So if these stop also, then we have a problem. The domain server will not function properly, right? Okay, so after you put the IP, then you add it to the domain, right? And then you add it to the domain as a role, add new role. That is how you should go. So this server manager will open with the dashboard. So actually we have in that this add role and features, right? So yeah, so this is how you add the server to the domain. So yeah, even here it shows you what should be satisfied before adding to the domain, right? There should be administrator account should be a strong password, then a static IP, then Windows update. Definitely these things should be done, right? So all the updates should be installed because otherwise, you know, there might be virus attacks or, you know, people might try to hack or, you know, yeah. So if when you update, so it will update actually the whatever the bugs or whatever available so that, you know, attacks are minimal, right? From viruses or hackers, the attacks will be minimal. So only after this you will be able to proceed, right? Right. So what are the options which are available when you're adding as a domain server the first time? What option should you choose? Can you remember? Yes, anyone?
Sorry, sir.
What is the option that you have to select when you are adding the role as a domain controller? So you're adding, let's say, a new domain controller. Yes, can you remember?
ADDS.
Yes, ADDS, yes. So when you are selecting that, next what I'm asking is, then you have some options, right? You have to select how we are going to create your domain or domain controller. So let's say you are creating everything new, the first domain controller. This is the very first domain controller. Then what is the option you are going to select? There are some options, right? What is the option you have to select? Anyone? So these are the things which I have already done now. So actually you have to select to create a new forest, right? So that will be the first option that you have to select because there is no existing forest. So this is the very first domain controller you are adding. right? So you will have to create the forest first, right? So you have to go to that option, right? Adding a domain controller to a new forest. That is the option you have to select. So do you remember now the options which were there? What are the other options? So one option is adding the domain controller to a new forest. What are the other options which are there?
Exciting forest.
Yes, adding a domain controller to an existing forest. Yes, that is another option. What are the other options which are available? Okay, then let me show you. Yeah, so we're going for the role-based one. Right, so we have to select a server. Yeah, so actually it will not show me unless I select something new. Right, I will show you in the slides. Give me a second.
So add new domain to existing forest.
Yes, let me share the. So these are actually the. So one is adding domain control to existing domain, adding a new domain to existing forest, and then adding a new forest. So what we did was adding a new forest, right? And then we did adding domain controller to an existing domain. That option also we did to install an additional domain controller to the same domain, right? So if you want to create a new domain, that means a new tree in the same forest, then we have to use the second option, adding a new domain to an existing forest. So this is the step that we should do next, right? And then these we have to select, right? Whether we need a DNS server, whether we want it as a global catalog, and read-only domain controller, you cannot select the very first domain controller, right? Okay, then yeah, after selecting this, then can you remember what you had to select? So then you go to the functional levels, right? Forest functional level and then domain functional levels also, right? So yeah, in the same page we have the DNS and the global catalog, right? So these you have to select also. So as I told you, you have to select this very carefully, right? Because if you select the highest option available here, right, you cannot demote this or go back to the previous functional levels, right? So if you think that your domain should have previous versions, right, so of Windows Server, then it's better to select the least functional option here, which will be 2008, right? But because later you can upgrade, but you know, if you select the highest here, then you cannot downgrade, right? So right, so yeah, so tell me some of the schema classes. Can one of you tell me a schema class? in the Active Directory? Yes, anyone? There were a few schema classes available in the Active Directory. Can you tell me one of them? Anyone? So what are the schema classes? So schema, it's like a map of the entire Active Directory, right? So can you remember there were schema classes and there were schema attributes. So can you tell me one schema class? There were a few which were available in the Active Directory. Right. So what about user account object?
So,
Right. Now you remember user
group.
account object, computer object. Right. Then the attributes will be if it is user account object, then first name, last name. Right. So I will show you the slide. Okay. There seems to be an issue with the. Wait, give me a second. So these are the schema classes, right? Computer account, domain, group. So those are the objects which are available in the Active Directory, and schema attributes are attributes related to this, right? Okay, can you tell me the container objects which are there in the Active Directory? Okay, so actually the container objects are the objects which contain other objects, right? So that means like OUs, folders, groups, and so on, right? Right,
Organization
so
or you
OUs, folders,
users. Organization.
domains, right? So yeah, I'm just refreshing what we did, right? Okay, so let's start. We will go for the next slide. So I showed you a bit about these group policies, objects, and so on, right? Right. So I even showed you how to create these group policy objects, or GPO we call them, shortened form, right? So using the group policy management tool or console, we can create separate GPOs, right? Or group policy objects, we call them. So that is this is also a kind of a leaf object, right? You cannot have any objects inside this group policy object, right? It's a leaf object, right? So this group policies, so that's we use it to. It's a means of controlling some settings, right? To maybe the computers or users in the network. So it has, I showed you this earlier day, right? So it has user settings and computer settings separately, right? So the group policy user settings will apply to the users and the computer settings will apply to the computers, right? So if you put some group policy to the user settings, then it won't affect the computers, right? Those rules will only apply to users. Right. So this actually happens during computer startup and shutdown, user log on and log off. Yeah. So that is where this group policy is applied to the users, right? Yeah. So configure one or more group policies, then use a process called linking to associate them with the ADDS objects. Yeah. So do you remember I showed you how we can assign separate group policies for maybe groups or users, right? So when you apply this group policy to a container, let's say to a OU, right? Then everything inside that OU will inherit that group policy. Right. So now where do we access this group policy? So it's usually there in the administrative tools. So these are what you see here. These are actually the group policy objects, right? So this is a group policy object. Okay, you can't. Yeah, see, right, okay. Yeah, it says it's a link to a group policy object. So these are the details and these are the settings of the group policy. Yeah, so to change it, you just go to edit, right? Right. So you see here computer configuration, user configuration. So yeah, now here I am having this OU actually for a lab, right? So that is for computers. So if I am putting any group policies there in this, so I should put the policies for the computer configuration, right? Not the user configuration. Actually, I don't need to apply any user configuration because my requirement is to apply these settings to the computers in the lab, right? So I should use this part of the group policy. Now, if I want to apply it to students. Now, currently there is no group policy. Okay, maybe I need to have a separate group policy. So I can select this, create a GPU. So I give it a name. Yeah. So this is a new group policy object. Now I just created it. So if I check details, sorry, settings. There's nothing there, right? Just a new one, which I just created. So if I want to put policies here, I should use this user section, right? Because I'm applying to the users. So there's no point actually in using the computer section here because it will not be applied to the users, right? it will be applied to the computers only. Right. So this so this is a GPO object. So when you create separate GPOs like this, now there is this default domain policy also, right, which will apply to all the objects in the network. Yeah, it's giving me a warning saying that you know, if I do any changes to the default domain policy, it will apply to every user in the Active Directory, right? So I have to be careful here so that, you know, I don't put anything unnecessary policies here, right? Because all these should be common to every user, right? Now, so separately I can use some GPOs like this to separately give policies to that whatever the user or the group or computers, right? So these will definitely inherit the default domain policy, right? But in addition to the default domain policy, I will, you know, have some additional features like see this one I did, I think last week, right? So I have enabled two policies here, right? So this is additional to the default domain policy, which is which, yeah, I just showed you. It contains mainly the, you know, password or account related things, right? Password policies. So I don't have to put these things here again unless unless I want to change this, right? So this will apply to every object or user in this domain, right? This password policy will apply to everyone in the domain. And yeah, so actually here the default domain policy computer configuration is used, right? So these password policies will be applied to you know, whatever the computers or servers which are here in the domain, right? And so when we log into those computers or servers, these will apply. This policy will also apply, right? And then if you put any additional group policies here, so for a student, okay, let's go to administrative templates, then yeah, you can see there are a lot of things. Right. So here usually we don't allow students to lock the computer, right? So this we can enable. So the other things are okay. We can allow them to change the password. The task manager, so you need to access when you want to, you know, in something application which is stuck. So and log out, log off also we have to have, right? But usually this lock computer we do not allow to students because, you know, they will lock and go and then, you know, someone else cannot use them, right? So yeah, so I enable that, so that will make the lock feature disabled for the students. So like that, I can restrict certain things to the students. Yeah, and maybe in the start menu, yeah, maybe I no, that is, yeah, there are a lot of things here. See, if I don't want something, I just enable that feature, right? Yeah, you can remove these folders from the start menu, and then what? Yeah, so I can prevent users from changing the toolbars, or I can prevent them from moving the taskbar to another screen or resizing the taskbar. So if I enable one of these policies, they will not be able to change anything, settings, right? So usually these will be put to, the common accounts, which might be used, so that, students will not change the settings. So, when they change, let's say if it is a common account to all users, right? So if one person changes some things, so the other person might not be able to properly use that login, right? So usually if it is your own login, then no issue. So yeah, see, a lot of things we can customize. Right? Maybe, the lock screen, or, maybe screensaver, or, those things can be, we can put policy so that, students will not be able to change those settings, right? So like that. So I applied one setting here. Let me just refresh. Right. So see, now it comes up here. So this policy will only apply. So where did I apply it? I actually applied this to the right. Now this is group policy inheritance, right? So first, the student, the one I created here, those will be applied, and then the default domain policy, right? So the order is by default like this. I can change this if I want, right? I can put yeah, this default domain policy first, and then the student policy next, right? So this policy actually will apply to all the objects or containers which are inside the students OU, right? It will apply to all these. So this OU, this OU, it will apply to all, whatever which is user accounts or whatever is in this. Yeah, so this only shows the group policies which are there, right? It don't show the users which are there. So this is the way. Now, if I want to give a separate policy for this 19 batch, right? The whole batch. So then I create a new one like this, and then I, give the required policies. So those will only apply to the usernames or whatever which is in that OU, right? 19. So if you take the structure here, if you take the whole domain, the default domain policy will apply to all these. Then, so inside, so to one of these OUs, I have separately given group policies or GPOs, right? So anything which is inside the S1 lab. So to check what is inside the S1 lab, we have to use this. So currently there's nothing, but let's say we added 20-30 computers, and then we add the computers here. So then that policy will apply to all the objects which are inside that OU, right? Okay, so yeah, I hope that is clear. Yeah, so it seems my computer also is a bit slow now, right? Yeah, so I showed you this one, right? So when I apply a GPO to a container like an OU, like students, as I showed you, this group policy will actually apply to all the objects which is inside, right? Whether there are other OUs or user accounts or there are any printers or whatever. So everything, this policy will apply. Right. So what are the advantages? So users can access their files even when network connectivity. Yeah. So having group policies. Yeah. So even when proper, let's say the network connection breaks, but still, if you have the proper policies put, right? So you can access your files. Right, so users can work with a consistent computing environment regardless of which workstation. Yeah, so when we put policies, the environment, it will be applied to whatever the computer that you log in, right? So it will be the same, right? The environment, when you log into any computer in the domain, so the environment you get when you log in, so it will be the same, right? Because of these group policies. Yeah, so if you create a redirection to some server location, right? Your whatever files, so then they can be automatically backed up, right? So if there is any failure, then you will have your data, right, backed up somewhere else. Yeah. So if application become damaged, right, or if you need to update, they can be automatically done by group policy. Right. So mainly, it is easy because, I just set up some group policies to a group and then it will apply to all the users, right? I don't have to, separately select the user accounts and then give this policies separately. I can just give to a group and they will apply to all the users within that group. So it's very, very easy to manage, right? So I can separate whatever, let's say the batches or what you have, but you have different subjects, right? So maybe for, certain subjects, you need to have, you know, special kind of permission given in the your login, you know, to do your work. So then, you know, I can customize the group policies so that you can properly do, you know, those subjects or whatever the practicals or whatever, right? Right. So missing application files, those kind of errors, you can so you can repair them automatically. Then yeah, you can centrally take care of the user files. Right. So you can manage user files using this group policy centrally in the server. So that is, so it's like this. I think I showed you this earlier also. You have the server here, and this is the client. So you can have, so your files in this server, right? So it's a central location. So using the client, you can access those files, right? So whatever saved will be in a central location, right? So when you log in through any client computer in the network, you will be able to access your files because it's in a central location. Now, if your files were saved here, right? Then actually, yeah, you cannot access the files which is there in an individual computer from another computer, right? This is not central. This data is not centrally manageable, right? But here it's in the server, so it's, you can access it from anywhere, right? These local files which are there in that computer only, right? We cannot access those when we go to another computer, right? So when you go to the lab, so you can't be sure that you will get the same computer every day, right? So there are other students also, so they might be using you know, one of the computers that you used earlier, and maybe some of your files are in that computer. Now how to get them? So you will have to wait till that user goes from the computer, right? So when you have files centrally, you don't have any issues. You just log into any computer in the network, then you can access your files from any computer, right? Because it's stored centrally in one place and can be accessed by many clients, right? So actually your files, only you will be able to access, no one else will be able to access, right? So security is put there. So when you log in from your login account, so you will be able to access your files, right? Other people cannot access your files because security will be there, right? And having centralized is also easy for administration also, right? You can maybe have a backup of those files, right? Because it's in a central place, and so if they are in separate computers, then it's difficult to backup, right? But if they are centrally in the server, so then maybe we can have a backup somewhere so that if something happens to the data, we can recover. Yeah, so you know, the loss of the files may be due to a damaged hard drive, right? So things can happen. So if you have a backup somewhere, then you can recover. Yes. So you don't have to do any manual security changes, right? Because you just apply the group policy to the group, and then automatically it will apply to all the objects or users which are in the group. So you can change the groups also. Right, so let me close this. So I think I did create some accounts that day, right? Yeah, right, okay. Right, let's say I needed to move this user to the B2 group. So I can just drag and drop. Yeah, it will give me a warning. Yeah, it will say the, when I move objects like this, then, whatever the group policies will change, right? How the group policy applies. So it's asking whether I want to move the object. It's getting a confirmation, right? Now, if I accidentally drag and drop, then I can click no here. Then nothing will happen, right? But if I really want to move this person to the this group, then I can click yes. Right now, you see it has gone to this group. Right now, the policy applied will be different. So previously, that user was under SOF. Now the user is in the B2 group of net, right? So any policies which are coming from this 19 or net, right, and B2 also, all those policies will be applied to the user now, right? So the old policies will not be there. Previously, the user was in the SOF group, so any policies which applied there will not be applied here. So like that, I can change. Yeah, so there must be policies or rules here to make sure that I cannot change it. Yeah, so let's see, I want to move this group to here, right? So if I cannot drag and drop that one, I just maybe create a new OU here, and then I can select the users or whatever the objects here and just drag and drop to this other one, right? Because that should be possible. So then after moving, I can maybe delete this. Yeah, so I have actually enabled the accidental deletion, so I won't be able to, there should be a way to delete that. Okay, anyway, so you get that, right? So if I change a user to another OU or group, some different sets of policies will apply, right? So let's say a student changed to another batch or another stream. Sometimes that might be possible, if the administration allows, right? So sometimes students change from one stream to another, right? Sometimes they select one stream, and then when they actually learn the subjects, they sometimes find it difficult to do the subjects, then they change to another stream. So usually that will be allowed, like maybe in the beginning, right? but later you cannot change like that. So anyway, so you can just drag and drop the users to the groups, then automatically the group policy will be changed, right? You don't have to do anything. Now if you are manually changing the permissions of every user, then moving to another group will mean changing the permissions manually, so then that will be difficult. But here you just apply the group policies to the users, then just drag and drop users to the groups and it will automatically apply. So group policy objects is what I showed you earlier. I created some new ones. So like user accounts and things like that, group policy also are there as objects, right? Which can be seen in the group policy editor. So you have to open that tool to manage the group policies, right? Right. So if you already have created group policy objects or files, you can also link them. So that option was there also. No, sorry. So I have to open the group policy. Right. I think you saw that option also, right? Here, see, link an existing GPO. These are the current group policy objects which are there in the in this server, right? So I can, maybe I can select from another domain also if another domain was there, right? Then the group policy objects will be listed. Then I can assign one of those group policies to this container which I have selected, 19, right? I can link an existing group policy object, or if existing group policy is not there, then I can create. See, I created this student policy just a few minutes ago, right? Yeah, so the administrative tasks which are there for this group policy will be creating GPOs like I did, then specifying where GPOs are stored. Yeah, so that also we can configure, right? There is a location where all these group policies, they are actually files, so they are stored somewhere in the Windows folder, I think. So yeah, so we can customize where we want to keep those group policy object files, and then managing the links. So that means linking to the OUs, right? Linking the group policies to the OUs. So we have three types of group policy objects: local group policies, domain policies, and starter group policies. Okay, so yeah, so I think we'll stop for today. So if you have any questions regarding what we did, you can ask.
Also, we will do practical things.
Right. Yeah. So so I have done that. I have taught you about the Active Directory and So usually the functions and everything in it. Yeah. So I think you have a fair amount of knowledge on Active Directory. Now this is group policy. So that is also a part of having maintaining a domain controller, right? Because this group policy is very important. Without group policies, it's difficult to manage, right? Definitely, you should have proper group policy. Otherwise, according to the users, right? Otherwise, they will. So you have to make sure that only the so when you are putting security, you have to make sure to allow only the things which they need, right? Then otherwise there will be problems. So it's hard to manage otherwise, right? So users, if they log in and if they change things in the computers, in the labs and all that, yeah. So I have seen some there are some students, they just log in and open some softwares and they change some settings, maybe hide some toolbars or something, right? And then the next person who comes, that might be a problem to them. So yeah, it won't be usable for someone else, right? So that is why we are having this. Or maybe some users might plug in flash drives, and then that those computers will be infected with viruses. So then you have to prevent those kinds of things. So these common computers in the lab, it will be like common to everyone, right? So to make sure that it is usable to everyone, that is why we are having these group policies. Okay, so if you have any questions, you can ask, or we will conclude the session for today.